Premier Sports Network here with FA registered intermediary Tom Keane. How are you, Tom?
Great, yeah, thanks.
Good. How did you become a football agent?
For me, I think everybody's story is probably a little bit different. For me, probably the main reason I became an agent is coming from a football family and having brothers who were involved in the game as professionals. Kind of going back to the start, I went to university and did a business degree, and then on the back of that wasn't really sure sort of what direction I was going to sort of go in work-wise. I'd always sort of been interested in the legal side of things, and I ended up then going on and doing a law degree. And the reasoning that I had at the time was sort of twofold. The first being, well, sort of whatever happened. I mean, my younger brothers were at the time in the Manchester United academy, and they were showing really good promise, and there was a fairly good chance that they were going to have careers in the game. And so for me, I kind of was thinking ahead and thinking, well, if they do, I want to put myself in a position where I can legitimately sort of represent them. And so sort of going down the legal route for me was sort of first and foremost give myself the opportunity of a good career anyway, but actually if that day ever came where they sort of made the grade and became professionals, actually I was there to support them and give them guidance, but proper guidance, because I think there's a lot of stories over the years about the world of agency and them being kind of unscrupulous characters, sharks in it for themselves. And I just think at that time, sort of seeing my brothers making their way in the game, I thought, well, I always knew that I would have their best interests at heart, and if I had that and combined it with kind of the technical expertise to actually do the job, then I thought I'd be able to give them the best chance and the best guidance for their careers. So I kind of went down that route. I became a lawyer, sort of practicing as a commercial lawyer, which kind of made sense, sort of beginning to understand the contracts, and also then on the intellectual property side, understanding kind of the branding around players and clubs. And then my younger brothers became professionals, and sort of alongside my sort of full-time role as a lawyer, I represented them for probably 6 or 7 years. And that was a really good experience. That was kind of my route into the game. Obviously, in that time period, I gained experience of negotiating contracts. The very first one that I did was for my brother Will, when he was 16 and he got offered his first professional contract on his 17th birthday, and the first ever negotiation I did was with Sir Alex Ferguson. So
Tough then.
Yeah, so that was kind of thrown into the deep end, but an unbelievable experience. And you know, that kind of, I suppose, on the back of that gave me the confidence that if I sat in a room opposite a table with him, that I can probably do it with anyone. And sort of from there, sort of time passed by, the boys sort of had a number of loans where that gave me again experience, a different type of experience, again dealing with all the kind of contractual issues, but also on the playing side, understanding what a club was looking for. Was my player the type of player that was going to suit their team? Was I convinced that the player was actually going to go and get out of it what they needed? Were they going to play? Were they going to learn something? Was the style of football kind of, did it match the club that they were coming from, and was it going to help them along that journey sort of long term? So it just started to give me all those different bits of experience, which then sort of moving along, what eventually happened sort of in my circumstance was, whilst my brothers were at Manchester United, I always felt that, you know, I can take care of sort of the technical side, contracts and whatnot. They're at the biggest club, one of the biggest clubs in the world. Do I actually really need a bigger network around me of agents, i.e. like a sports management company, when actually they're probably already where they want to be? And it was when my younger brother Michael transferred away from Man United and went to Burnley, that I thought actually to help him on his career path, I could probably now do with expanding my own network, bringing in extra sort of expertise and guidance for myself. And in the period whilst I'd been practicing as a lawyer, I met a lot of agents. And obviously at the moment I'm practicing intermediary with New Era Global Sports, and for me, kind of the reason I ended up working with the guys there was because over a long period of time we've built a relationship, especially with Rio Ferdinand, being a senior player at Manchester United when my brothers were coming through. He was always excellent at taking the time to sit down, to mentor the lads, to give them the time of day, to ask them about what they were doing, to push them and test them and see if he can, help them improve in any way. And that kind of relationship that they had with him, and then that I sort of also got to have with him, and then some of his colleagues at New Era, it built kind of a natural sort of relationship and trust. And then I got to the point where, I'd always had a natural interest in football as a football fan. Those guys were looking to expand their sports management company, and probably because of that relationship that we built, and I'd like to think because they saw that I was professional and capable, they asked me if I would come on board full time and join them and not only represent my brothers but obviously a host of other players, and I think at the moment they're looking after around 100 players. So there's a lot going on, a lot of work, especially at this time, with players obviously now able to move. And that's been a really good experience. That's kind of taken me sort of full circle now, so I'm involved in the game full time. That's allowed me to, again, develop my own network further, gain more experience more frequently, and actually experience it not just from the family perspective, which I originally had, but actually go and work with other players, and that's been really, really good.
Is that a challenge for you, obviously trying to attract new players to your books, basically? Is it difficult? Obviously you had your brothers, so obviously your brothers know you've got their best interests at heart.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go about, say, approaching someone from scratch? Does it come through word of mouth, or is it literally you just go and approach them?
Yeah, it can happen in a number of ways, but I would say it's not an easy thing to do. There are a lot of agents out there now, especially since the deregulation. There's more than ever, and more people kind of trying the hand at it, really. In some cases, that's a good thing when you'll get people who, will come into the game, and obviously they'll be very good and give players good advice. But then also, on the other hand, there's probably people coming into the game and advising players that maybe shouldn't be. So there's a lot of competition to attract players. What I suppose all you can do is sort of focus on yourself and what you can give to the players that you look after. We at New Era, we offer our players sort of a 360 approach. So we look after everything to do with the playing side, everything to do with the commercial side, everything to do with the sort of financial, the career path, the long-term development, the lifestyle, and then finally the transition, which I think is not picked up on enough, the transition from football into a second career or life after football. I mean, when these guys are players, they're obviously almost like the flavour of the month. Everyone wants a piece, everyone wants to know them. Life's very easy, they're being paid big sums of money, but actually what a lot of people then don't see is suddenly when it all ends, they're still people, and they've got to find, whether these guys are secure financially, everyone needs a purpose and a direction, and I think a lot of players run into trouble without that, and that's one thing that we really take the time with our players to sit down at quite an early age, and get them to start to think about what besides football are they interested in, what have they ever thought about what other fields they may like to work in, and just get them thinking. So actually, when that moment comes, it's not a just fall off the end of a cliff. Actually, if you can start to put some building blocks in place, and some ideas and some routes for them to go into other things afterwards, then that's a big help for them.
Do the clubs have any involvement in that, or is it literally really down to the agent?
I would say it's probably an area that's massively underthought. Clubs probably don't do enough. I think some of them are aware of it, but at the end of the day, clubs are football clubs and they're football club businesses. Really, I would say agents, especially if they've had players for a long time and sort of been with them through the good times, there's a responsibility on them to sort of give back and sort of morally help and help guide a player into that next stage. And I think there's also got to be a certain responsibility on players. I work with players sort of all age ranges, and you have lads who are 20, 21 and the end of the career feels like it will never happen. But actually, once players start to mature and get to their late 20s, it is such a short shelf life. I think there's also a responsibility on them to realise this isn't going to last forever. What am I going to do afterwards? So I think probably all parties need to come together and help. And I know there's some sort of other organisations out there now which are beginning to form, which actually help players which are finished. But yeah, I think it's a collective effort.
Moving on to obviously transfer markets open at the moment. Can you talk us through a deal? So from the start, who gets approached, and basically all the way through till the end, and obviously not every complication, but certain complications along the way. Obviously, you see deals, and to the public eye, people just think, oh, it's a straightforward thing. It's clearly obviously not that. People say, oh, this transfer is dragging out. Why is it dragging out for so long? If you just give us a bit of an insight into like the period from start to finish of a transfer.
Yeah, there can be a number of triggers for a transfer. So it may be that you have a player who's doing really well and performing, so it generates interest. Clubs want him. That's probably the ideal scenario for an agent, especially if you've got a number of clubs after one player, because in that scenario puts the player in a really strong bargaining position. That is actually kind of probably the occasion that happens the least. Quite often what happens is actually the players, a player may become surplus to requirements at that club, and you may have a club contact you and say, he's not part of our plans for next season, can you help find him a club? Because actually, from a club's perspective, if he's not part of the plans, they'll want to move him on to free up budget to bring someone in who is part of the plans. And I'd say that's the public don't see that, but a lot of transfers, that's the reason they happen, because clubs decide that they want to move players on. The ones that always make the headlines are your star names who may have their Real Madrids and Barcelonas and Man Uniteds chasing them, but they're kind of the exceptions to the rule. And then finally you kind of get the ones where maybe a player's become unsettled, maybe for personal reasons, could be location, for example. They want to be moved closer to family, or maybe they've fallen out with the manager, or whatever it may be. The player may decide, or if they've not been playing enough, or they've been in and out of the team, and for their career path they feel like they'll be better suited somewhere else, then the player can come to you and say, can we see what we can do? Is there anything out there for me? So there's a number of different triggers for the start of it. And then I think the first thing really to do is to sort of glean from your player, what is it they're looking for? What type of club? What type of football? Financially, what are they looking for? Location-wise? There's a lot that goes into the pot, and it's important for us to understand from our players what is it that they want to achieve. It may not always be possible, but I think you've got to start at that point. Then then from there, you'll, especially if it's not a case where you've got clubs chasing your players, in which case it's obvious who the sort of suitors are, and you'd sit down and you'd work out who's going to be the best one. But if that's not the case, then the job of the agent is almost like that of a salesman, really. You've got to go round the clubs, first of all the clubs that you've sort of identified as possibly being suitable, but really you've got to kind of go around, you've got to figure out what clubs are looking for, not only players in which positions, but what profile, what type of age, what type of personality, all things that they're looking at now. So there's that side then of understanding what the clubs want, and then it's trying to sort of compromise and marry the two and figure out the best route. Is there a player a club that the player likes the sound of, the opportunity? Is the club interested in that player? And if it's one that the player wants, it's our job to try and make that happen and convince them that our player's the right one. And then you've got the final piece of the jigsaw of then the club that the player's going to be departing, convincing them that it's the right thing to do if they don't want to let the player go. And obviously in that case they want to be compensated adequately. Or if it's even if it's the case of the club wants to move the player on, most players will still have a price on their head, and it's then being that middleman and helping a negotiation between two clubs to get that deal over the line, to make it happen for the player. And then whilst you can assist with the negotiation between the clubs, actually the player is your client, and it's your job then to go and maximise his playing contract, whether that be in terms of finance, length of contract, other benefits that may go into a football contract, things like insurance. You want when your player finally moves, you want to obviously know that you've covered all bases, and the contracts, the best contracts that the player could have got. And I think really, if done properly, I think in most cases it is possible to get to the point where all three parties are satisfied. If a player's left the club and they've been compensated adequately, they can go and replace him. If the club that the player's coming to has got the player that they want, then they're happy. And then obviously finally, if you can get the player the sort of contract he's looking for, then he'll be happy as well. So that's kind of the process, and it actually then doesn't stop there, because you think you have the sort of signing of the player, the unveiling, which is kind of a big thing media-wise these days. But then actually after, you may have a player who's now moved to, well, he will have moved to a completely new environment, but he could have moved to a new culture. He could have moved to a different area in the country, away from his family. Obviously will have to find housing, may have to find schools. All those things, there's kind of a real big then emphasis on, I think, you as an agent to not just, you sign your player over on the day that they sign and you take your commission, but actually then you've got to help them settle in, because at the end of the day the player needs to perform, and for them to perform, they're kind of all the things on the periphery that make life comfortable and easy need to be taken care of.
Obviously, you touched on it before about deregulation, and obviously and going through the transfer process, there's a lot to take in. Do you reckon you'll ever get to a stage where players will be doing all this themselves, or do you think agents are here now and they're here to stay?
I think obviously agents have been involved in the game for a long time, and I cannot see how there would be a scenario where they would not be needed, because the way the game's gone in terms of finance and commerciality, in terms of the commercial deals that football clubs do, the type of sponsors and brands that want association with players, everything that goes around a player's life that we spoke about earlier, kind of that 360 approach to taking care of a player's life so they can concentrate on the game and performing, which may sound easy, but to perform at an elite level when everyone else is trying to do the same, it is not easy. It takes a lot out of them. It's playing, it's training, it's resting, it's eating right, it's sleeping right, it's doing everything that they can to perform at that level. I think for a player to take that burden on themselves would be crazy now, and I think it would have a detriment on the game. I think there's too much, the level and the standard and what is required of players now, there's too much for them to also be going out, speaking to clubs. What if a club tells a player that he's surplus to requirements? Is that player going to ring around 20 clubs and speak to directors of football, heads of recruitment, managers, assistant managers, owners, whilst also training? And I think it's impossible. So I think agents are a part of the game. I think they always will be. But I think there is also an onus on agents to be professional, diligent, work responsibly, and have good relationships with clubs and obviously the players that they've got. And I don't see any reason why that can't be the case.
You obviously touched on, obviously got to have a good relationship with the players, head of recruitment, but going a bit more behind the scenes, take for example when your brother Michael signed for Everton, how important was it for you to have a good relationship with that player liaison officer, so you know that while Michael's obviously at Everton, the club are obviously looking after him on that footing as well?
Yeah, it's important. I think actually when a player goes to a club, you know, a lot falls on the shoulders of the player liaison officer to help settle them in, but actually the onus should be on everyone at that club to welcome a player, to help him feel part of it as quickly as possible, because at the end of the day they've probably acquired an asset, and making that player comfortable can only be a good thing for them. Obviously more emphasis lands on the player liaison officer, especially if a player is, as I say, like moved location, but even if they haven't, they've changed environment. I saw it with Michael, my brother, when he going from Burnley to Everton. Just naturally, it's a different club, it's a different environment, it's change. These guys, they may be in the public eye, they may earn good money, but they're human, and they're just like anyone else. You change jobs, and it takes you got to find your feet, you've got to settle in, you've got to adapt, you've got to make your own little relationships within the club. All of that takes a bit of time, which is where a bit of patience is required. But that's tough because, especially football fans, there isn't patience. But I think, that transition, the player liaison plays an important role. And again, I think the agent can help with that process.
Obviously, you touched on having good relationships, obviously looking after your clients, but if anyone was watching this now and they were thinking, I've always wanted to be an agent, is there any other tips that you would give them?
I think, again, going back especially since the deregulation, there's a lot of people who see it as an attractive industry to go into because it can be lucrative. I think what people probably don't see is how it can be very hard work, because recruitment of players is difficult, and it can be a case of you may go and sit in front of 10 players and you may not recruit any of them, because there'll be other people out there trying to do the same, and it can be a lonely industry, sort of travelling up and down the country to games late at night on a Tuesday, Wednesday evening, on a Saturday or a Sunday, when you've got a family at home and you're away at football all weekend. There's the sides to it which aren't just the big money making that everyone kind of focuses on. But I think actually to come into the industry and be successful, I think you need to look at yourself. And the question I would ask, which I asked myself, is why would a player choose to sign with me and my company over somebody else? And I'd say the advice I'd give is to think about ways in which you can differentiate yourself, make yourself attractive. Sort of for me, one of the things that I found was different to a lot of agents was the fact that I'm a lawyer and legally qualified. I think that straight away gives me a certain credibility. Also, I've been lucky in that I had a route in to the game through family. Not everyone has that, and for me that was an important factor, because I'd say obviously getting that first player is very difficult, and I was lucky that I didn't kind of have to overcome that hurdle. But as I think, it's thinking about kind of what the job entails as a whole, how you can make yourself stand out, and probably putting yourself out there. There's a lot of big agencies now in this country, and if you're really aspiring to come into the game and get a flavour for it, and then I would advise people to reach out, see if they can do some shadow work through a few weeks of a transfer window, see what it's all about, see if it's for them or not. Because I say, as well as the glamorous side that everyone sees, there are the parts of the job that aren't nice, like any job. So yeah.
Super. Well, thank you very much for giving us some of your time today, and hopefully we'll catch up with you soon.
Great. Thank you.